there is one universal truth to what's getting someone ranking. Is there any type of checklist that you think maybe touches on all of them for best practices and what companies should be doing to show up in these platforms, specifically around PR and visibility?
I mean, I think Ahrefs has the best study, one of the most robust. So they looked at 75,000 brands to see which factors are most likely to influence mentions in both ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI Mode, and AI overviews. And what they found was branded web mentions correlate on the highest scale for AI visibility, so like 0.66 to 0.71. And they found the number of backlinks was more of a lower correlation. How do you get more trusted branded mentions for your company across many different sources? So this is, mainstream publishers, it's niche relevant publishers, industry trade publications, podcasts like this, it's Reddit and social, YouTube, all these things come together to create what I like to say is like a digital footprint of authority for your brand.
Welcome to SEO On-Air. I'm your host, Koa Kauwe. Today, I'm bringing you Kelsey Libert, co-founder of Fractl. Kelsey has spent nearly 2 decades studying what makes content earn attention, coverage, and authority. She has helped lead thousands of digital PR campaigns and is now applying that same research mindset to AI visibility, brand mentions, and why some companies get cited while others are ignored. Kelsey, welcome to SEO On-Air.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today.
I'm excited to have you. So today we're going to dive into how we determine what actually makes a brand visible and credible, and when AI platforms, how it makes it visible and credible when AI platforms are opaque, volatile, frequently disagreeing, and just in general, not necessarily trusted in what they're citing. So I want to dive into that a little bit with you. To start, let me ask you just the first question here. You've spent years studying why people share content, why journalists cover certain stories, and now you're studying why AI cites certain brands. Are those different versions of the same problem? Are you seeing a pattern and similarity in there?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, brand authority is really what determines brand visibility across all of these different ecosystems. So it all comes back to earning brand mentions that drive that brand authority in your niche. While Fractl's expertise and a lot of our research has been in how do you earn media, how do you create newsworthy research, how do you get those brand mentions, really what we're relying on when it comes to how do you drive the visibility in these platforms. We're using those million data point studies from the data SEO powerhouses of like Ahrefs, SEMrush, and MuckRack to tell us kind of how do you drive the visibility and what is the overlap here. And in these ways, we have Ahrefs, right? They have a huge study. They did over 75,000 brands that found branded web mentions have a very high correlation with AI visibility. We also have MuckRack that found 95% of AI citations come from non-paid media, 89% from earned media. And then also Stacker found third-party coverage can boost AI citation visibility by 325% versus just relying on your blog alone. And I could spend the whole podcast citing off studies like that. So, we've done the research to figure out how do you get those brand mentions by producing newsworthy content. And then we have lots of other bigger data studies that show how those brand mentions are really driving visibility in AI and just traditional SERPs in general.
We've seen the strategy in the past with like backlinks where people knew that backlinks drove authority to the website and they would produce as many as they possibly could. Mm-hmm. We've seen maybe some similar modeling of that strategy today with brand mentions where companies will produce 1 million listicles and review style articles. Yeah. Google's they're trying to filter the quality versus the quantity issue that's kind of tending to happen with this new strategy. You focus on PR and brand authority. How do you view this style of, I want to call it like the modern keyword stuffing or the modern backlinking, right? Where they're producing just bulk without the quality. With PR, you guys tend to be more research based. How are you keeping that authenticity to the work that you do versus the volume that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I first started in the industry back in like the early 2000s, listicles were all the rage, right? And it's kind of funny that they're kind of coming back into vogue now. And I've seen many, even our own agency competitors that are producing a lot of these best agency rankings. And they're dominating the SERPs right now, right? And AI and whatnot. I think over time, all of these systems will adjust kind of how they do that kind of visibility to be less manipulated. But I think that's what's great about the research side of things, right? Because we're not just producing content that AI can just regurgitate like a listicle. I think over time that content will be taken away by AI search. By producing more research-driven content, your brand is getting out there and saying something that only you can say because you have this proprietary data, you have these exclusive subject matter experts, and you can say something that's really valuable, timely, new, isn't easily replicated by these other systems. And that is what truly builds your entity authority and your visibility and your brand mentions across all of these other places, because you can get out there and say something that AI can't. And I think that's the major differentiating factor of the work that we do versus, putting out a general listicle.
I love it. I feel like I've seen a theme where everyone's recognizing that effort is actually rewarded inside of these platforms now, where it's like recognizing what you're doing that's truly different. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about research, and that's not something that I think every company wants to be heavily involved in. It just sounds like a lot of effort. Yeah. So how are you designing like credible research around AI systems, and when their outputs are constantly changing? How are you actually getting this credible research that you feel like is not completely, but unique for your customers to the point where AI is going to appreciate it rather than see it as duplicate content or something that's just regurgitated?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to doing credible research, it really comes up to the sample size of the research that you're doing, right? So we have different statisticians we use that can help us determine how large a study needs to be. So if we're doing a survey, right, we want it to be, maybe 300 people if it's some niche segment like male cops over 45. But if it's, representing the broader market, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people is kind of what we're looking for. So you need a really robust sample size to be doing authoritative research. I think you can also use really credible sources. So you can use government data sets, pretty much every industry, right? Whether you're in automotive or health, there are large public government data sets that can be mined for really interesting insights on the global market, the US market, that can be really insightful, that people just have to take the time to clean that data and analyze it to find valuable insights and back it up with subject matter expertise. I think generally when it comes to the way that AI systems are driving visibility, right, is that lost my train of thought on that one. Really, you don't want to just get out there and say the same things they're already saying. You want to be able to, get in there.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's what we see is like you're in the PR side of things, and everyone doesn't feel like they have PR worthy moments. Yeah. So if I don't mind me going off script here a little bit, when you're doing this research, how are you helping them find a PR worthy moment so that you can get, published?
Right. We've done a lot of research over the years on understanding what is PR worthy, right? What is newsworthy from a journalist standpoint? And I think this is where most brands fail, because what they want to do is put out like their latest product announcement or their latest, new feature or whatnot. And what we want to do is flip the script and focus on, what do your CEOs or your experts have to say on this breaking news story that maybe your specific company has a unique lens on the trend in the industry, and what commentary you can provide. And that's something maybe
really interesting.
Yeah, journalists don't have access to. Or what is your proprietary data in-house that you can kind of mine for interesting insights that speak to that story or that unanswered question that people are, in Google Trends, you can find a lot of information of like, what are the queries that people are asking? Or you can dump a bunch of trending stories into ChatGPT and say, what are the unanswered questions from these series of stories? And there's lots of great low-hanging fruit for a lot of companies in their niche to be an expert in that way, and then create a follow-up story on trending news, which I think is extremely valuable. And when it comes to measuring that visibility, I think really the problem the industry is having right now is it's not a deterministic ranking, right? It's probabilistic. And it's not even a ranking, it's a synthesis of information. And it's based off of, personalized data, timing, what model you're using. And so there isn't just one universal truth in all of that. I think you have to run many different types of prompts. You have to use a lot of different types of models. You want to be analyzing kind of what are the primary sources that are coming off across all of these different platforms? Are your competitors appearing, but you're not? And if they are, what is that type of content that they're appearing in, and how can you recreate that but do it better? So a lot of people just do one prompt and say, oh, I appear in ChatGPT for this one query. Well, that's great. That's your model, your training, whatnot, really. Your personalized data, your timestamp, your location. That's not going to be true for everybody. So you have to do very large kind of studies on that type of stuff across many different models and many different time series to see kind of what does the aggregate say and where is the opportunity that you're missing.
I like that. That's one of the questions. Excuse me. One of the questions I wanted to ask you. I'm going to have to edit this out.
Okay. You're okay.
So there was one question that aligns with what you were saying that I wanted to talk about. Man, I'm going to need a second.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
I think I breathed down the wrong tube there.
Oh, it's hard.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to ask you was about the AI visibility and ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Google's AI, everything that we have visible to us right now. It's doesn't seem like there is one universal truth to what's getting someone ranking. Is there any type of checklist that you think maybe touches on all of them for best practices and what companies should be doing to show up in these platforms, specifically around PR and visibility?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Ahrefs has the best study, one of the most robust. So they looked at 75,000 brands to see which factors are most likely to influence mentions in both ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI mode, and AI overviews. And what they found was branded web mentions correlate on the highest scale for AI visibility. So like 0.66 to 0.71. And then he found the number of backlinks was more of a lower correlation. So the important takeaway here isn't that backlinks are no longer valuable, right? Because we also know Google still weights that pretty heavily in authoritative backlinks and niche relevant backlinks, right? So the bigger picture here is how do you get more trusted branded mentions for your company across many different sources? So this is, mainstream publishers, it's niche relevant publishers, industry trade publications, it's podcasts like this, it's Reddit and social, YouTube, all these things come together to create what I like to say is like a digital footprint of authority for your brand. And when any one of these ecosystems goes to respond to a query, it's that footprint of authority that tells any one of these sites that you are the most authoritative source in your niche for this topic because you've been mentioned hundreds of times on that kind of niche relevant topic across many different sources on the web. So I think the more that brands focus less on any individual link or any individual quote, it's more just how do I get my brand out there through all of these different opportunities, from subject matter expert interviews to data studies to just trend analysis to any type of content that you can be producing that goes beyond the listicle, right, into something really new that the industry hasn't talked about yet or hasn't answered the question to, or the trends that are about coming up in the last month or two or seasonally, things like that.
Yeah, it's as you talked about that, I thought about like your brand having gravity. And like what you're really like pulling towards you is based on like how much of the stuff you're connecting with is actually relevant to your industry.
Right.
Or if you're starting to spread yourself so thin that you're not pulling anything towards you because you're just seeing broadly across the internet instead of like associated closely with those that makes sense. Yeah. So when you're talking about that brand value, it's pretty heavy in the gravity sense that it's pulling everything back towards your brand in a funnel that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
With PR, you're natural. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and this has been a big debate, I think, in the last few years, especially like what is relevance, right? That seems to be like a hot word in the last 3 years or so in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago. And I really struggled with this initially because to me, it was like, okay, the PR industry is starting to hit too heavy on like, oh, it needs to be very relevant to the brand. It has to be very on brand, but you're not going to get the same engagement from consumers or publishers if you're too on brand. So I think the important thing is always to take a step to the side and say, what is something that is emotionally compelling, is surprising, and we have research on this, is this what drives people to consume content and engage with brand content? So, right, make it surprising, emotionally compelling, insightful, educational, actionable, those type of things. And then it can be something a little bit more broad. So like if you work in, pet insurance or something, you could do studies looking at what are the most common accidents that dogs get into? And, does it vary by breed? I just got my daughter a golden retriever puppy for Christmas, and within 2 months, he ate a chicken bone that cost me lots of money to repair. So things like that can help people, be a little bit more top of mind of what kind of things I need to look out for, and then be thinking about insurance and things before they need it, right? And so it doesn't need to just be like, oh, we provide the insurance. It's like, okay, go a step to the side and what is a consumer concern and how do we do research on that topic? And it can be relevant to B2C, B2B, but don't just think about putting your product out there. Think about the concerns that bring people to your product as the answer.
Yeah, something that came to mind earlier too when you were talking about this, it was talking about PR and trying not to make it just like your own story, but like trying to find out what's there. It's like, don't be the story, be part of the story by connecting with people outside of like your industry. That makes sense for me. What you just said, like, it's not just blasting out that I'm important. It's blasting out that I'm connected to these things and I can be valuable for you if you want to find that path. I like that as a nuance to relevant is,
Mm-hmm.
because it really is it's like authenticity, which is also valuable today,
Yeah.
but it's not quite an answer, right? Like you have to have like practice and understand it.
Yeah. And at first, I think a lot of the PR industry was like, oh, well, maybe mainstream media isn't as relevant as like a niche publication. And while I agree with that in a certain way, there are also like a lot of these mainstream publications like Business Insider or Huffington Post or CNBC, they all have different beat sections, right, that are still very relevant to your specific vertical generally. So maybe you don't want to get on mainstream news, maybe you want to get on the technology beat or the education beat. And I think by doing that, you pair both relevance and authority in a mainstream publisher, and then also magnify it with reach, because these sites generally syndicate to a lot of their publisher partners, or they're just seen as thought leaders in the space, which drives natural syndication, which then gets further into that more niche relevant subsection of the internet that I think a lot of people want to target. And that allows you to do it at scale by targeting the big sites. But then the flip side of that is so many PR teams just focus on the big ones that they miss going into the long tail. And those, in my opinion, are some of the easiest to get. We just have to do a little bit more digging like we did with Fractl to find, what are those niche publishers of influence for your specific audience. And then by targeting those sites, you're building higher relevance and entity authority within your niche, because you're getting further and further down that kind of like topical funnel of your industry and getting those citations as well as the mainstream authoritative ones.
Well, you beat me to the question, I think, because you answered that so well. Your audience research suggests that niche publishers can sometimes be more valuable than major publications. Have digital PR teams spent too much time chasing the big logos instead of influence?
I mean, I personally, probably I built a lot of my career really prioritizing the biggest mainstream sites, mostly because of that built-in syndication. And what's nice now in the last 3 years or so, we started using Sparktoro, which is a great audience research tool. And we just published a study with them in the last week or two, actually, that looked at hidden gem publishers. So these are like the smaller niche industry sites. They delivered 1.7 times higher audience affinity. That's a score of like your audiences, how often they're going to these sites and using these sites over mainstream ones. So it had 1.7 times higher audience affinity than major outlets, despite attracting 130 less traffic. So essentially, all that means is, these very small sites had like less than 10,000 or even 5,000 visits a month, but they were very niche relevant. So they're driving very relevant audiences to that site because they care about this, small section of your vertical. But that's a great signal for LLMs too, right? Because to talk about topical relevance and entity authority, you want to be building in a more narrow focus. So I think it's really a three-prong approach now. It's get the mainstream news sites for that really high authority and that natural syndication that takes a lot of the legwork out. Go after the more niche relevant ones, the smaller sites, and figure out what are those sites within your industry to build that kind of topical relevance. And then really focus on the cross-channel distribution. So that includes, going beyond just mainstream publishers and niche publishers, and think about Reddit, think about YouTube, podcasts. Like, how do you take that same awesome study you did or that expert you have and syndicate it across all these influential platforms in your niche that build up that entity authority for your specific brand, which is what drives visibility across all those platforms.
This is cool. It feels like the true white hat, it's a funny term to use because we talked about this a little bit earlier, practice of generating like authority and link building is do some authentic research, some unique research, make it visible through some type of PR action if someone wants to post it, and then it kind of waterfalls down through all your other marketing efforts. But it's created, it's unique to you. It can't be associated with someone else. It's work that you've done. And that's building a brand. That is like really delivering a message for what your company wants to deliver.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And Fractl did some research about this too, looking at both LLMs and across AIOs, 8,000 keywords, 25 verticals. And what we found is that AIOs, right, because it's Google, is generally prioritizing more of those mainstream authorities. So you're thinking like the very high authority publishers within any given niche, whereas LLMs oftentimes surface the more niche authorities. So that was like, if you're doing an investing query, maybe it's surfacing Investopedia instead of CNN, or it's surfacing Edmunds instead of CNBC. So like, it's still, to me, very authoritative publishers. They're just vertical specific, right? They go very deep into one topic instead of very broad. And I think that's where LLMs favor more of the depth because it shows very strong.
That's really interesting. Yeah. The need for an LLM to be in its vertical and understand what's going on here without being distracted by all the other data. So the way they crawl is a little more specific in those in the PR style aspect as well.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking AI a little bit here already, so I'll jump into the AI questions because we wouldn't have a podcast at this point without some type of AI question. But many marketers say that AI helps them work faster, but makes the output more average. What should digital PR teams automate, and what should remain protected from automation?
Yeah. And this is one of those really hard questions, right? Because it comes down to a lot of how I think AI is set up operationally within a company that can either make it your competitive advantage or your greatest downfall. And so what we saw in our research, right, was that 53% of marketing workflows now involve AI tools, which was up from 38% last year. But 48% of marketers said AI made their work faster but more average, whereas 26% said it made it faster but better. So that's a huge problem, right? Because we're all saying, great, 50% of us say it makes our work faster, but it's kind of more generic and crap. Well, I don't want more crap, right? I want better work. So the secondary part of that study was looking at kind of like what are the checks and balances in these AI workflows that marketers are using? And this is where the SOS came out for me, which was, 72% of us are doing general editorial review with any of the content that AI creates, but only 54% are doing any type of fact checking. Only 27% are, evaluating bias. I think 40% roughly were doing legal review. And when it's trained on the whole corpus of the internet, you start to see like the major problem here. If only half of the content that AI creates is fact checked, and we know AI oftentimes will hallucinate, we're only contributing to the problem here. And so that said, if there are many of us that are doing these better checks and balances, that have more proprietary data fed into these systems to teach it, okay, this is how we build an effective media list. This is how we do an effective personalization in an intro pitch. This is how we really laser in on who are the best sites to pitch this content to, because we don't want to be part of the people that are just using AI to scale a bunch of slop and pitch publishers something that's totally irrelevant to them, right? That's how we hurt our brand as an agency, and we hurt our client's brand as well, right? Because now we're just part of this spam that's happening online. And so I think AI can be used in every single part of the marketing workflow and the PR workflow, especially. And I go against a lot of the industry in saying that. I think because we have so much data over the last 14 years of doing earned media on how do we get lasered in on the best publishers, and not even the best publishers, the best writer at a certain publisher. Because oftentimes there can be 5 or 10 different writers that cover technology or lifestyle or health, right? The verticals we're pitching often. But there's still one person that's the best fit. And the more often you're hitting those publishers and not the best person, you start to just lose that value, I think, as a PR person. And so what we're doing is we're using it to automate really repetitive research heavy tasks. So things like finding the best fit journalists at a certain publisher based on how often have they talked about this topic specifically, and what is the sentiment of their coverage? Because people make mistakes all the time pitching somebody who actually, maybe they covered a certain topic like AI a lot, but actually they hate AI, and now we're pitching them how much people love AI. It's like, okay, don't do that. It can do data analysis. It helps us do pitch personalization because it can research across, social media sites. It can research across author archives and tell us kind of like anything from where somebody went to college to what they posted about in aggregate the last 3 months. And it can pair that with like what we're pitching them and where their gaps are in their coverage, right? Like for a person to do that back in the day, that would take days or weeks of time. And now it can be done in seconds, but you have to know how to prompt it with, what are the interesting insights from my data study that this person hasn't talked about yet that builds on their coverage and gives them a natural follow-up story, right? So it's where that kind of prompting, I think, comes down. And then you're adding in expert point of view. You're making sure you have a very sound research methodology. Those are the things that are still human-owned, right? So oftentimes you hear the human in the loop. So we use AI in every single part of our process, from ideation to pitch rating to subject line rating to follow-ups to pitch personalization. But there's always a human looking at it to ensure, is this accurate? Is this grounded in the data that we've said? Because I've seen it pull data out of nowhere, out of thin air that didn't come from our study, but you have to give it the guardrails. Do not scope creep beyond what is said in this study. Do not make up any type of information, pull directly concrete data points from this landing page only, right? But if you don't put those barriers in, that's where it can kind of go outside of what you've said and create a lot of problems for your brand.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a better testimonial for the power of the analytics side of what AI is capable of, like how much it empowers people to make better decisions and make the product better and more informed.
Yeah.
So often people are scared of the content it creates being mediocre, but they don't talk about how much analytics can actually drive to produce better, more informed product for your customer. I think it's amazing to think of the writers and actually determining which writer was truly the right choice. Because I love that example of how many times someone probably has pitched some type of service to someone that's thinks the opposite of what they were pitching them, right? Like, I don't want to write about, or I'll write about it and I'm gonna make you look awful because I hate what you do. That's really fascinating to think that that problem existed for hundreds of years of marketing. And now we're at the point where you can assess that immediately based on all the stuff that's produced on the web right now.
Yeah.
I love that too, from the side of like consumers. So they're looking for the best solution. And now your PR work, your brand dimensions, your backlinking, everything is connecting it to try to deliver the message for what you truly do. And AI is getting better at determining if that's true information or if that's false information, largely by credibility that's built through connections and natural connections on the internet.
Exactly.
Now you're in a complicated position where a company is trying to deliver that message. They want everyone to know what they do. And I'm going to put you in a tough spot here because I'm going to make you just role play this out. If I have 90 days to improve my company's brand and I have a $20,000 budget to do it, where do you think I need to go to deliver to these LLMs that I am the right solution for the service that I offer? Yeah. Where's the right spend for 20,000?
For sure. I think there's so much that companies have in-house that they're not leveraging properly, right? Like your company founders or your company leadership team, how much time are they just sitting in meetings all the time? Or whereas if you could just have one meeting with them a month where you're asking them very pointed questions about the trends in the industry or the proprietary data that they have, and what your own data says about kind of the questions people are having or the needs people or concerns people are having. And then you just take that 1 hour meeting with them and then you use that to pitch them to all these other publishers that are talking about those problems, or to figure out where on Reddit, in which subreddits are people asking these questions. And then now you have concrete data of real subject matter experts to kind of get out there and help answer those unanswered questions. Yes, it's the cost of that person's time, but the scale of that, the ROI of that, I think is very untapped by a lot of companies these days. And it's a big need in the industry, both from the social platforms that are eager for that content and the publishers that are eager for that content. And that's free besides the junior digital PR person maybe you're hiring to do that, or the agency you're hiring to help kind of get that information out of those thought leaders. And then beyond that, I think it's a query of kind of what data do we have internally? Like, if you're a company providing services, you have lots of data generally on your customers and kind of their pain points or what they're using you for, or how they're using your tool. And so really looking at how can I mine my own data to come up with kind of a news hook based on what these people are talking about or what their concerns are. A lot of that is just free. It's just untapped resources. And even beyond that, right, then doing your own research.
I love the thought of like, don't spend anything yet and figure out what your message really is by interviewing, get transcripts, record all this stuff and figure out what your brand truly is internally.
Yeah.
At that point, you've done some free work. Now what's next? Yeah.
And then hire the PR team and say, okay, here's like our great subject matter expertise, our data, or hey, maybe we want a little bit more and we're going to take that $20,000 budget and invest it into doing research beyond what our own company. Like maybe we're more protective of our data, but we want to do a survey of consumers or a survey of business owners or whatever our target kind of market is, and kind of ask them questions. And oftentimes it's going to be very valuable for your own business to learn, and then go out there and publish research on that for the publishers that are interested in those type of questions too. I think that's the best investment nowadays, is doing research, because it goes beyond what AI can just produce on its own, or what's already been said by a lot of generic kind of companies out there, right? You have to do something more than what's already out there. And I think that's the biggest challenge and what deserves the biggest budget, and then kind of using that budget to get people to expand reach, right? Because there's so much data now that shows us your website alone isn't what's going to drive your brand visibility or your brand authority. You need a lot of other people, a lot of other influencers, a lot of other platforms pointing to you as the authority. So you really need a team dedicated to kind of getting your brand out there across all these channels. And I think that's where that budget can be dedicated, whether you're hiring someone in-house or an agency that's already an expert at that process. That's the key nowadays.
That's way deeper, I think, than most will realize when they listen to that at first pass, because that's a beautiful bar to set for marketing agencies, is do more than what's already out there. with a lot of the AI marketing agencies that are popping up, it's doing a whole lot of what's already out there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's truly differentiating one company from the other. We're looking at a whole bunch of the same flavor all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have one final question for you. And it's, what are you convinced marketers will understand 2 years from now that most agencies do not understand today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is that people are starting to wrap their heads around it's not about a single link anymore, or a single viral campaign hit. It's how do you build a digital footprint of authority online across all these different platforms that point to you as the most trusted source in your niche. So, the last 10 years, maybe we're focused on, the title of this page, or, what is the anchor text that we're getting the brand on, or what is this individual thing? And it's not about individual anymore, it's the aggregate. And so how do you really build a brand of authority through doing the research, through getting your experts out there? And all of that is what builds what they're calling now entity authority. And that's really what these LLMs are using to signal your brand is the trusted source in your niche. So, back in the day, I think everything was very, very siloed to whether it was PR or brand or social or what content. And now it's going to be, how do we take really robust research or paired with our topic experts and kind of get all of that out there to build our authority across the web. And that's what drives brand visibility across traditional SERPs, across AI systems, and often even social. So coming together under that, I think, is going to be the biggest shift in the industry.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to me. I think a lot of agencies existed in their silos. There was the SEO agency, the social agency, the web development. Are we saying that marketing 2 years from now doesn't have these silos, that it's one?
I would love to see that, right? We all have been talking about it maybe for a decade or more, especially the larger companies, I think, tend to have many kind of different silos that all are kind of focused on getting the same thing out there, but oftentimes you end up stepping on toes and the work halts because of that. But if you can, I think there will be a new role that's more of like that head of GEO, the generative engine optimization, or head of content, whatever we all decide to call it at the end of the day. And really that person will be the pioneer of this exclusive research, the subject matter experts, and then syndicating it all down to these other teams. So it's
amazing that like Notebook LM and the other tools that are used to maintain context have allowed or empowered all these silos to come together and pull the sections out that they need, which has never really existed.
Yeah.
Hey.
Good times.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about the future of marketing. I think that that's the big thing today, is many people were scared that marketing is like changed too quickly with the way the LLMs are doing things. But in reality, marketing rewards genuine effort and good product. And right now we're having a really unique chance to make companies stand out from their peers that are maybe just, like setting that bar. They're not building anything unique. They're building what's very accessible. And because of that, you have a chance as a marketing agency to make your customers stand out better than ever.
Right.
Kelsey, I really appreciate you joining us for this episode of SEO On Air. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.